What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to World According to Briggs. Today, we're going to take a look at Space City, Houston, Texas. Houston is the most populous city in Texas and the fourth most in the United States. I learned that a couple years back and I was surprised. I had no idea they had more people than Dallas. You always assume Dallas is the bigger city. No, not at all. Houston is known for its connection to NASA and the space program, its proximity to the Gulf of Mexico, and its crazy weather. Houston, like all cities in this series, has some problems, but it's still a great place to visit or call home. Okay, let's see what's up with Houston, Texas. The Houston area was occupied by a few different indigenous tribes for over 2,000 years. These tribes are almost non-existent today. They were pretty much wiped out by foreign disease and conflicts with various settler groups in the 18th century. The land remained largely uninhabited until around the middle of the 19th century. Houston was founded by land investors on August 30th, 1836, so I find that one kind of interesting. Instead of it like it was a trade depot or something like this, it was founded by guys trying to turn a buck. Houston was incorporated as a city on June 5th, 1837. The city was named after former General Sam Houston. He was a big deal during the Alamo and all that stuff. And he went on to be the president of the Republic of Texas. Houston has had its hurdles over the decades. In August of 1867, yellow fever took over Houston. This wasn't the first time the Gulf City had a breakout. By September 14th, the city had already suffered over 100 deaths due to the fever. By the end of 1867, 492 out of about 6,000 Houstonians had died from the disease, and additional 200 deaths or so are suspected but not confirmed. They only had 6,000 people, so 492 is a buttload of the population. By the 1860s, Houston had become a commercial and railroad hub for the export of cotton. Yeah, Houston was really big in cotton back in the day. Over the decades and the last century or so, Houston has been hit with some serious tropical storms and hurricanes. In 2001, Tropical Storm Allison made landfall, dumping roughly 40 inches of rain on parts of Houston. The storm cost billions in damage and killed about 20 people. It always seems like there's some flooding going on in Houston. Every storm season doesn't have to be a hurricane. They just always seem to get a ton of flooding. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey struck Houston, with some areas receiving up to 50 inches of rain, breaking the national record for rainfall. The damage was estimated to be around $125 billion and is considered to be the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. The death toll, 70 people. That's directly related to the hurricane. There was other people that couldn't make it in the emergency room. Things like that happened. So over 70 people died because of this hurricane. Houston is one of the most diverse cities in Texas and is probably in the top 5 for diversity in the whole United States. It has often been described as the most racially and ethnically diverse metro area in the United States. Here's how they break down. In 2019, the Hispanic population, which any country Hispanic, 45%. Black and African American was 22.6%. White is 24.4%, and Asian 6.8%. When it gets into the religion category, you got 73% of the population is Christian, 20% is unaffiliated, Jewish is 2%, Muslim is 1%, Hindu, Buddhist, and other faiths are all 1% or less. A couple fun facts about Houston's demographics are: Houston is the home to the largest African American community west of the Mississippi River, and they have one of the largest LGBTQ communities with the largest pride parade in the United States. Houston is considered to be one of the most LGBTQ friendly cities in the United States as well. Like I had said earlier, in the 1860s, Houston had created a good-sized commercial and railroad hub for the export of cotton. That went on for a really long time, and then they got into the energy game, and that pretty much took up the economic landscape for quite some time. It still goes today, mostly in oil and natural gas. They do have other major technology and software companies like Cybersoft, Houston Wire and Cable, GatorHost, and a bunch of other software firms. But yeah, still, oil and gas are the main driver for Houston's economy. Like I said before, they also have a lot to do with NASA and the aerospace industry. Houston has a bunch of well-known Fortune 500 companies. Phillips 66, ConocoPhillips, Baker Hughes, Halliburton, Occidental Petroleum, Waste Management, Westlake Chemical, Enterprise Production Partners. A lot of big companies come out of Houston. Like I've said in the other videos of this series, when it comes to neighborhoods, all the locals have different opinions. You could ask 50 locals what the worst neighborhood is and get 30 different answers. That's why we have to go by the livability score. But let's start off with the best neighborhoods. Probably the best neighborhood in the city of Houston is West University. They have a livability score of 82. Their crime rate is 52% lower than Houston's average, and their cost of living is 77% higher. If you go outside of Houston City in the metro area, Pearland is probably your best bet. They have a livability score of about 94. There's about 106,000 residents in this Houston suburb. Pearland's crime rate is 30% lower than the national average, and their cost of living is only 3% higher than the US average, so that's not bad. When you're looking at middle-of-the-road neighborhoods, this one could be argued all day. They have a lot of good ones, but probably one of the bigger ones is Pasadena, Texas, which is just kind of southeast of downtown Houston. They got about 153,000 residents. Pasadena has a livability score of 77, and their only real knock is probably their crime. Their crime rate is 23% higher than the national average. But you got a pretty good trade-off. Their cost of living is 11% lower than the national average. Their housing prices are 43% lower than the national average. Their schools are decent, and they got a lot of things to do. When it comes to the worst neighborhood, this is normally where we get the most grief. The locals really feel strongly about what is the worst neighborhood. I'm from Los Angeles. I give the numbers all the time, but people always try and tell me Compton's the absolute worst. It's not anymore. It was in the 90s. These days, it's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not as bad as it used to be. But when it comes to Houston's bad neighborhoods, you got two that pretty much have the same stats. You have Northeast Houston, and you also have Far North Houston. Far North Houston has a crime rate that's 222% higher than the national average. Their unemployment numbers don't look any better. They're actually 18% higher than the national average. Northeast Houston has a crime rate that's 175% higher than the national average, and their unemployment rate is 49% higher than the national average. So the Houston food scene, what's good? You know, it's all over the map with this one. Because of the diversity, you have so many different types of restaurants that are doing great things in Houston. Down on Bel Air Boulevard, you have Crawfish and Noodles. This is a great place to eat. It's got that whole Viet Cajun thing, Vietnam and Cajun mixed together. It's kind of weird. You have Nifa's on Navigation. This is really good Tex-Mex food. I don't know if they invented the fajita, but they probably do it the best here. Of all the places I've ever eaten that serves fajitas, this is by far the best. They got another place called Phat Eatery, P-H-A-T. This is Malaysian street food, but I love how they kind of mixed in the P-H-A-T. It's pretty good. And of course, there's barbecue. If you're a Texas city, you gotta have good barbecue. Oddly enough, one of the best places to eat barbecue in Houston is called Good Barbecue. This one's down on Kirby in Houston. It's family owned. It's been around since like the mid-70s. I don't know what it was, but it seemed like they had a different taste than other barbecue places. It was great, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's bad. It was phenomenal. It's just a little bit different. That's what I like about the place. If you're going to Houston just for, like a visit to see things, there's quite a few things you gotta see. Number one on everyone's list should be Space Center Houston. This is the official visitor center for NASA's Johnson Space Center. You can walk through the space shuttle replica, check out a replica of America's first space station, and if you show up on Fridays, you could actually meet an astronaut. If you like museums, head down to Houston's Museum District. They've got 19 or 20 museums down there. 11 of them are free, and most museums are within walking distance of each other. Some of the museums include the Museum of Fine Arts, the Children's Museum, the Houston Museum of Natural History. They got a bunch more. Houston isn't really known for its outdoor activity, but they do have some really nice parks like Buffalo Bayou Park. This is 160 acres of land to bike, hike, walk, relax, picnic, walk your dog, throw a frisbee, take a leak in the trees. That's what I did when I went there. You can also rent a kayak, canoe, paddleboard. They also got about 250,000 bats living underneath one of the bridges. They're Mexican free-tailed bats, and you hang out around sunset and watch them all fly around. If you want to see more animals, you got the Houston Zoo. It's home to over 6,000 exotic and indigenous animals. You got a thing where you can feed a giraffe. They also have a children's museum that I've never been to, but it does have a lot of positive reviews. I don't know if it's an ongoing exhibit, but they had like that TV show, How It Works. That was an exhibit there for a while, might still be going on there. And then, of course, you have to visit the Alamo when you go to Houston. And if you could find it there, you'll be an amazing person because it's actually in San Antonio. How many of you started pounding out a comment? Houston has a long and colorful history with professional sports teams. They used to have the Houston Oilers, but they left and went to Tennessee, and then they got the Houston Texans in the NFL. The Texans still play there, and they have a really, really cool stadium. It's actually right next to the old Houston Astrodome, where the Houston Astros played forever. I think that's still there, and nobody's been in it in years. It's totally abandoned. The Astros now play across town at Minute Maid Park. Now, I say it's Minute Maid Park now, but if you know anything about professional sports, that name could change with a sponsor next season. But right now, it's Minute Maid Park. Oh, and the Astros got caught cheating a couple years back. In the NBA, you have the Houston Rockets. Then you go over to Major League Soccer, they have the Houston Dynamo FC. In women's soccer, they have the Houston Dash. That's the professional teams. They go big here for their college football teams too. You have the Rice Owls, Texas Southern Tigers, and then of course the University of Houston Cougars. Houston has its fair share of famous people. A lot of people were born there, but then they moved to other places and were raised other places, like Jennifer Gardner. She was born in Houston and ended up being raised in Charleston, West Virginia. But people born and raised there were A.J. Foyt, American race car driver. He was big in the 70s. Him and Mario Andretti went at it all the time. It was great. Beyonce and her sister Solange, or whatever it is, are from Houston. Dennis and Randy Quaid are from Houston. The Undertaker, the wrestler, he's from Houston. Kenny Rogers is from Houston. He sadly just died last year, and his restaurant made some good chicken. I love that place. Hillary and Haley Duff are from Houston. You know, I just had an incredible urge to eat fried chicken with Hillary Duff and watch The Undertaker wrestle Randy Quaid. I don't know what that's all about. It's weird. YouTuber Liza Koshy is from Houston. Dusty Hill is from Houston. He was the bass player for ZZ Top. Sadly, he died this last July at the age of 72. Matt Stone is from Houston. He's the co-creator of South Park. A lot of famous people came out of there. I'm just scratching the surface on this one. Like so many other cities, Houston is a great place to visit or live. You just gotta watch where you're moving to or where you're visiting. One other note I will give you about Houston, it is very spread out. If you've ever been to Los Angeles, it's kind of similar. Los Angeles isn't like all compact. It is spread out over miles and miles and miles. Houston, I get that same vibe from. But if you ever get a chance to go see some sporting event there or go see the NASA stuff, it's well worth it. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the video. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.